We are now live. Cool. Welcome everyone to Chattering with Nicholas Vince, and this month I'm totally stoked to be chatting with Ashley Thorpe, who I'll come back to in just a few moments. Ashley's joined us along with Vicky and Fernando. We'll hopefully hear some more from them later on as well. But first off, I just wanted to thank everyone for dropping by and to announce that I am going to be doing more of these Hangouts on air. And I'm going to be doing something called the Luggage in the Crypt interviews. This is a series of interviews that I did in the 1980s for Skeleton Crew magazine. I interviewed Neil Gaiman, Clive Barker, Dave McKean, Charles L. Grant, and quite half a dozen other people. These were really fun interviews to do, so I'd like to update that, bring this into the modern world, and we'll do this with what we're doing now with the Google Hangout on there, so I'll be up chatting to them live. And I'm delighted to announce that Simon Bamford, Butterball, my fellow Cenobite, Simon Bamford is terribly talented actor and writer as well. Simon writes for the theatre. And he'll be joining me on July the 27th. When, as I say, I will be interviewing him. The format of Luggage in the Crypt is that I ask people what they take with them into the afterlife. What? Books, films, food, all sorts of things. It's a fun format, so I hope you'll be able to join me. And that's on July 27th, Sunday evening. This time, again, it should be really good fun. Simon and I tend to laugh an awful lot whenever we're chatting, so it should be a great time. So that was one piece of news I wanted to share with you. I also wanted to share with you something more about the London Horror Festival. They're holding a short film competition. That's open until the 1st of September. They're looking for films that are less than 15 minutes long. It doesn't matter about the tech quality. If you want to do your horror movie on an iPhone, that's absolutely fine. Applications would be through the website, which is www.londonhorrorfestival.com. It's www.londonhorrorfestival.com. International applications are welcome. The panel of judges will be myself, Barbie Wilde, and Tim Dry. Obviously, most of you, I think, will know Barbie as another of my fellow Cenobites. Tim Dry is a great friend of Barbie's and mine, but Barbie and Tim used to work together back in the 1980s when they used to do robotic dance and so on. And Tim was in Star Wars. He was he played monsters in Star Wars. So Tim is a very, very cool guy. So it's your chance to win, chance to have your film screened as part of the festival. If you're selected, I think it's a $5 for the entry fee. So check it out, all you filmmakers. I know there are quite a few of you. Please check that out. I will look forward to seeing your submission if it makes the long list. Okay, cool. So that's kind of updates on me. Other stuff may come up during things. So what I'd like to do now is to introduce Ashley Thorpe formally. I'm just going to do that. Just before I do that, Ashley, I just received an email from somebody, and he's just said he couldn't find the entrance to the show, so I'm just emailing him now. That's John Van Pie, who I hope to be working with cool on a video trailer for for Other People's Darkness, the book Other People's Darkness, and more about that later as things progress. Okay, cool. Ashley, who's contributed interviews, articles, and cover art for Fangoria. He's a writer and animator of 3 short animated films, including Hairy Hands, which I just posted a link to on both my Facebook pages. That includes voiceovers from myself and Doug Bradley. And Ashley's currently working on a short film called Borley Rectory about England's most haunted house, starring Reece Shearsmith. And it has a voiceover by Julian Sands, I think. And
yes,
music,
full narration.
Yeah, full narration by Julian Sands, who I've met a couple of times, 2 or 3 times now. Keeps on inviting me to climb mountains with him, and I point out.
He does that to everyone.
He's really sweet.
No one's daft enough to say yes.
No. Yeah, he's a lovely man, really, really sweet man. And Reece Stephen Severin. You've got music by Stephen Severin, is that right?
Yes, yeah. He's going to compose a complete score for it. So.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Which is exciting.
Which is very, very exciting. Right. So before we talk about Borley Rectory, Ashley, I'm just curious as to how you became interested in horror. What is it that first inspired you? Was it a book? Was it a film or play or just ghost stories told by your friends and family? How did you get into it?
It was a little bit of all of the above in a weird way. My parents always had an interest in horror stories and kind of myths and legends, that sort of thing. So I kind of grew up hearing sort of local ghost stories and myths and those sorts of things. But I was always crazy about monsters and strange creatures and aliens and those sorts of things. I always had a very vivid imagination as a kid. But at the same time, I also had I used to suffer from night terrors when I was a little boy. I used to wake up in terrible kind of waking dreams and literally nightmares I couldn't snap myself out of. Wow. So for years, I couldn't go anywhere near anything horrific. If I even heard spooky music, I would start shaking. I'd be physically terrified. And it was only actually as I got older that I started to become fascinated with these things that actually had that much power over me. And that the more I started to read about it and read things like Fangoria and almost demystify certain aspects of these things that were frightening me, or at least give them a face. I think that's what it was. The bad dreams stopped, and it's a really strange relationship in a way. I kind of got into horror to make the bad dreams go away. It's almost topsy-turvy in an odd way. So they've always had that fascination with me. But originally, as a child, I absolutely terrified. Even the concept of a place like the Madame Tussauds Chamber of Horrors, I'd have nightmares about the idea of a place like that existing, let alone even going in there.
Wow.
So, yeah, a very weird relationship, and at the same time, simultaneously having my mum especially, and my sister was younger then, but my mum especially being fascinated by ghost stories and things, so kind of pulled between two extremes, really.
Right. No, I know that you were born in Inverness, but you grew up in Devon. So what sort of age were you when you moved down to Devon?
I was pretty young. I think from memory, I think I was down here by the time I was about 2. I think so. Okay. So very much a Devonshire lad, really.
Right. Right.
And surrounded by. I always seem to remember being surrounded by old people. Especially people that used to tell stories like the hairy hands and things like that. So I grew up thinking that they were absolutely true. and that Devon was full of these horrible dark corners that were just full of horrible things. Like the woods, they're full of horrible things. The roads and the moors, they're full of dreadful things. Those dark pools on Dartmoor, full of witches. And it was all a bit like that. So everywhere I went was kind of invested with this idea that there was something special around every corner, under it, every ivy bush held something kind of magical, and I never quite let go of that as I got older, I think.
Wow.
And now I'm going to inflict it on my own kids.
How old are your kids?
I've got 2 step boys who are 15 and one's just about to turn 10.
Right.
And about 5 months ago, I I had a little daughter, so you may hear her occasionally in the background somewhere.
Well, she's most welcome to join us if she decides to. So, what is your favourite scary book?
Ooh, I have a lot of favourite scary books. I think the scary book I always found enchanting and had the sort of impact on me that I almost felt angry when I started reading it, because it was the book that I really wished that I'd written, was Weave World. That really annoyed me, that book. Because it was the I'll tell Clive to his face one day. Like that, but yeah, I mean, I loved it. I read that when I was about 15, I think, and it was that idea of it feeds into what I was saying just now. It's this idea of the fantastic was absolutely woven into every filigree of the banal. It was you didn't have to necessarily go to another world. There were aspects of it that were woven within this one, and I found that absolutely fascinating. And as a 15-year-old reading that, where it was this notion that to go to somewhere scary, you had to go to Transylvania to meet Dracula. Dracula didn't just turn up in Devon, whereas that Weave World had this possibility that an antique could hold something miraculous. So that's the book I was fascinated by, because I was charmed by it, and also there were these terrifying ideas in it. The book that I can't read anymore is Pet Sematary. Can't read that anymore.
Is this because of the children?
Yeah, absolutely. I was deeply moved by it when I first read it, about the same age actually, about 15, and I was really shocked actually how cold that book is when I first read it. And I tried to read it again a couple of years ago, and I couldn't get through it. It was terrible. I just couldn't do it.
No, it's interesting. The reason why I guessed about the children, because I remember my neighbour when I was living in Streatham had said it was the book where she stopped reading Stephen King because it involved children, and none of the books had up until that point, and it was just it was crossing a line as far as she was concerned.
But the interesting thing about it is that it's not even gratuitous in at least at first, in the way that something like The Rats is by James Herbert, where it's just we'll just have a baby getting eaten by rats, just because it's a shocking moment.
It's a horrible thing, yeah.
That's like a grand guignol thing. I think the chilling thing about Pet Sematary is that you get so invested in the characters because of the way in which they're kind of these kind of blue collar people that you can really identify with, and it's such a painful event that he puts those people and you through as a reader, that you just think, oh, I don't want to be suffering this. I don't. This is dreadful. And I just, it's not the fantastic elements that hurt in that book. I think it's the ideas in it. It's just the talking about loss and death, and especially death of young ones, and the kind of things that would go through your head if you'd lost someone. How far would you go to get them back? Dreadful ideas. I don't need to think about that. I fear about those sorts of things every day. I don't need somebody like poking me to remind me about them. So yeah, that one I just can't go near anymore. Really can't.
That's really interesting. I need to go off and read this book. I'm actually reading. I have it beside me at the moment. I have. This was given to me.
Dr. Sleep.
Yes, it was given to me for my birthday by my brother, and I think I'm about that much through. I don't know if you can see. I really only just started. This is the front here.
I can see. Up there.
It's up there. I've actually got a bookmark.
So are you a big fan of The Shining?
I am. I'm a big fan of the book. Funnily enough, I tried to watch the movie the other day.
Right.
It may have actually been on a flight. It probably was on a flight. United Airways do these things.
They let you watch The Shining.
They can't have been on. No, it must have been on iTunes. I mean, they do show classic things. No, they wouldn't have had The Shining on an airplane, would they? I got about half an hour in, and I just thought, gosh, this is really overblown. I know King hated it, and perhaps I just read that before I started it again. I love the book. And I remember the book and Danny, and it's that feeling of cold as well in the hotel, and his description of snow, and you really do feel the isolation in that place, and being in, reminds me of a holiday we took in Sweden. We ended up in a hotel. It just reminded me of the Overlook Hotel so much.
How was your holiday? Oh, it was like The Shining.
It was not a nice holiday. It was one of the worst holidays I've ever had. Not a happy circumstance. Loved Sweden. Really did not like this hotel. And I think it was when I was working full time, and I just suddenly realised I was exhausted, and we were only there for a week, so I spent most of my time in the room as well. That wasn't nearly not
talking to imaginary guests.
Yeah, I'm just listening.
I like you, Lloyd.
And listening for the sound of a child's tricycle going up and down the corridor outside the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, not good. So, what about a scary movie? What's your most scary movie, do you think?
I think the one that really affected me when I was younger was Alien. One, because my mum let me stay up late to watch it. And she used to let me stay up and watch very mild things with her as I got older. Things like The Devil Rides Out, those sorts of things. The Hammer things I kind of grew up with. And even those were borderline whether I was going to be able to take it or not. But then, I don't know why she did it. Because I was so fascinated by science fiction. And she'd seen Alien at the cinema, so she knew exactly what was in it. And she said, do you want to stay up late and watch that? I went, oh yeah, brilliant, yeah, spaceships, all sorts of great stuff. Yeah, I watched that. And she went, oh, it's not like Star Wars. And she wasn't kidding. And I watched it, and I was absolutely mortified. It terrified me for weeks. I had nightmares for a long time after that. But as I got older, I had this. I know I'm painting my mum to be a sadist, aren't I? She's not.
She's helping you overcome your night terrors. This is therapy.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Therapy.
Thanks, It just held an overriding fascination for me for a long time afterwards, and a lot of that I think was the fact that it's a film which is rich in so much symbolism because of the Giga stuff, and I love that conflict between almost the kind of the prosaic, the blue collar thing again. It's these guys out in deep space. They don't really want to be there. They just want their money. They just want to go home, and that very kind of working class environment colliding with this this gothic imagery, this very kind of sexualized gothic imagery with these kind of weird religious overtones. Everything's so huge and grandiose, like, the inside of the ship's like a cathedral but made of bone, and these ideas just always stuck with me. And it's a film, I have to say, I do watch at least twice a year. I just keep going back to it, and I'm one of those mugs that had it on VHS and then got it on DVD. And they brought out a special edition DVD, so I get that one. Now I've got the Blu-ray, and I keep going back to it. I can't leave it alone. And I was lucky enough recently to interview John Hurt, and I spent most of the time just talking to him about Alien, and it's just because I just had to. Tell me about that, And probably not the obvious things that I think a lot of other people had asked me about. There were lots of strange little things I wanted to know about, but that's coming up in Fangoria soon anyway. So.
Oh, is it? Oh, brilliant! I was going to ask.
Yeah. I think it's supposed to be in issue 326. I don't know, but these things get bumped a lot, don't they? So.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Alien, definitely for that side of things. In terms of fascination, I suppose, with the genre, I'm crazy about the Universal horrors, the original Frankenstein. Huge fan of German expressionism as well, so things like Caligari, things like Hands of Orlak, Nosferatu, those sorts of things. From an artistic bent, those sorts of things draw me back a lot. And from the romantic side of things, which gave birth to things like Scarecrow, the Hammer, the original Hammer films, the early run, the sort of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, those sorts of things. So
It's interesting. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is one of my favourites. I just think the images are just so haunting. That whole German stuff of Nosferatu, etc., is extraordinary.
I think the fascinating thing about Caligari is the fact that you can see that the majority of the sets, all the shadows, are just painted onto the studio walls because they didn't have the lights to do what they wanted to do. So it's just painted on. But that adds so much, ironically, to the production value of it, because it's this mentality of, well, okay, have we got lights? No, we haven't got lights. So what are we going to do? Well, we'll just paint the shadows on the walls. What? We'll paint the shadows onto the walls. And the backdrops, we'll paint everything onto curtains. We'll just put curtains up at funny angles and paint geometric patterns on the floor to force your eye to look at that character on that shot. And it was that kind of radical form of filmmaking, and that mentality, that credo, for which I know that Clive and yourself had the exact same spirit with your theatre productions at the beginning. It's, we can't do what they're doing. So we'll do it in a completely different way. You know, if you can't join them, we'll beat them. We'll do it differently. Yeah. And I think that's the fascinating thing about the Caligari, especially. You can just see that, well, we can't do that production value. We'll do it our way. Well, and they revolutionised film in the process. Completely.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think that one of the things we did with I was just thinking of the plays that I did last year when I dramatised two of the short stories from What Monsters Do. When we came to Green Eyes, we had to have a cat on stage. Well, you're never going to get a cat on the stage. You can't, you know, obviously you're never going to put a live cat on stage. We thought about using a stuffed cat, and I just thought, that's just going to be silly. We eventually ended up with a cushion, just an orange cushion. It was a towel. I made it myself. It's a bolster with an orange towel zipped up and made to a cushion cover. And it's all about the belief, you know, the suspension of disbelief. I know the two people who are watching now have read the short story. And I apologise to anyone else because this is a definite spoiler. There is a moment where the lead character drops the cat on a fire. Now, we didn't have a cat, we didn't have a fire on stage, and people still screamed, and it's still one of the biggest shock moments in the play. And every night there was that moment. What? You can't do that.
Because they'd invested in what you presented to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I know because I've watched your films, is you're all about story, and you even have a quotation on your.
I thought you were going to say you're all about doing it on the cheap.
Hey, you're all about doing that. Hellraiser was not an expensive movie for the time. It was, people forget it was a low budget movie.
Absolutely.
But I think it is about you. As I was going to say, you've got a quotation on your IMDb page. It comes with saying about the difference about presenting people with the special effects full in your face as opposed to letting people's imagination work, which I think is what brings people in.
Because
you actually,
I think unless you can, and it's a bit like, unless you can absolutely deliver the goods, I think you've got to keep your monster in the shadow. Unless you've got Alien, unless you've got Pinhead, you've got to be in the shadows, haven't you, really?
Yeah, no, and I think the point is that, of course, whenever you're doing horror movies, and Alien, thinking about it, is a lot about, a lot of the suspense is they don't know what the hell's going on. And even when you get the chest burster, it disappears mighty quickly. You see it screams and it's gone.
And the adult one is always in shadow, and it's always in like a flickering light, smoke, all sorts of stuff. They don't give you too long to look at it. You have to watch until the press shots and things came out. I mean, I spent years in my youth, not really knowing what it actually looked like. I knew roughly what the shape of the head was, I knew the teeth, I knew it had a long tail, but other than that, I didn't really know what this thing looked like, because it was all pieced together from glimpses in the dark.
Yeah.
So it's, but I mean, that was its power.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that is true of so much of, it's about suggestion. It's about allowing the imagination to play rather than just having a
Yeah.
Godzilla. Bless it, like the original movies. You can see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the back.
Yeah, that's part of its charm, but
it's part of its charm, and it's the effect. It's very cool. Okay, cool. So you use. Now, make sure. Incidentally, welcome to Eric. Eric, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Eric, as I'm doing an interview with Ashley just at the moment, may I ask you to mute yourself? And I'll ask you to unmute yourself a little bit later on when I open the floor. That's cool. Now, you use a technique called rotoscope. Have I got this correct for your animation?
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's one of the techniques. Yeah.
It's one of the techniques that you use. I remember you
Yeah.
talking to me about this when you came round to my house to record my little bit of hairy hands. But for those who are watching who don't know, you say it's one of the techniques you use. So please, explain a little bit about rotoscope and the techniques that you use.
The technique of rotoscoping is where you've filmed a live action sequence, and then you basically either paint or digitally go back into the image, and you draw or you paint over the top of it. A great example of that, and certainly the one that inspired me to even think about it in that way, is Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, back from about '78, I think it was.
I remember seeing that.
And
yes.
Yeah, it was his sequences especially. And another part of the reason why they looked that way, I think, was because they didn't have enough money to finish the production.
Yeah.
But it was the ring wraiths. There was something about the ring wraiths that I found really otherworldly, because they'd been obviously guys in cloaks on horses, and then they'd been painted over the top of, so that and I was fascinated by this look that didn't look real, and it didn't quite look animated. It was this weird thing that existed in between. And it was the first thing I thought of when I was starting to make Scarecrow, about this ghostly highwayman. I just thought, well, and I didn't have any kind of formal training in terms of animation at all, so I didn't really know what I was doing. So I just thought, well, okay, I can paint a bit, and I can do that, and I can take photographs and film those bits, and I can paint all the other bits that I can't do. And by default, these techniques kind of drifted together, and I realised I was rotoscoping and doing something quite similar to what Bakshi had been doing. Not as well, but that kind of approach.
Very good.
So it's a weird little. Most of my films have that technique going on, where it's a blend of live action photography and painted backgrounds, or painting over the actors that have been filmed, and with real backgrounds. It's a mixture of the real and the painted, and hopefully to a point where it becomes quite difficult sometimes to work out which is which. That's kind of the trick. I don't want it to look too real, or I don't want it to look too hand drawn. It's just sort of drifting weirdly between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, and I noticed you put up a tweet that you're going to have to use this method to actually add the smoke to the pipes in Borley Rectory. Which kind of brings me on to the next question. Okay, so
spent the whole weekend doing it.
So this brings me on to my next question about this.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is like animation, so you have to examine and possibly paint each frame. Therefore, how long does it take you to, say, do a minute of the finished film?
It depends on the complexity of the shot, really. As an example, I did a 20-second shot last week, and it took me the whole week to do that shot.
Wow.
20 seconds, yeah. And that was because there were elements in it. It was Reece and Jonathan, and they just stood there side by side, smoking their pipes. So you've got the pipe smoke. What was I thinking? And you've got you've got fog drifting past them.
Uh-huh.
You've got silhouettes of leaves kind of moving around on their faces and things because the wind's supposed to be blowing in the trees. You've got light flickering and light rays and things like that. So because there were so many elements in that shot, it just became a very, very complex shot.
Right.
So I mean that's just one, that's just one shot. And at the moment I'm animating a sequence where he glimpses in the swirls of the fog the first indications of this spectre of the nun.
Uh-huh.
So that involves taking footage of somebody in the gown and stuff, and then almost destroying it so it moves with the fog. And so some scenes are very, very easy to animate because you don't have to do an awful lot to them. People just sort of sat there doing nothing. That's fine.
Yeah.
As soon as you start building it up in layers, it becomes complex and it becomes incredibly time-consuming. So it's a little bit like how long's a piece of string, because you could have a 10-second shot that has two characters looking around and only their eyes are moving. We could have 10 seconds, like in Scarecrow, where it's a coach and horses going off a cliff. Yeah. Which is just, why did I write that in the script? Why didn't they just stop? So it really depends. It really depends. But it's a very time-consuming process, But perversely, I do really enjoy it. It's quite exciting seeing these things come to life.
Sure.
Especially the elements which weren't filmed, weirdly. It's exciting seeing Reece acting, but it's even more exciting seeing Reece acting not against a green screen, but seeing him, in this grungy black and white environment of swirling fog like something out of Bride of Frankenstein. That's when it starts going, hey, this could actually work, That's when it gets exciting.
So, yeah, no, I mean, as I say, I've seen your work, and I particularly love Hairy Hands for fairly obvious reasons. But it was sort of like Scary Crow, and so, and it is wonderfully evocative. I think the great thing about Hairy Hands is because, of course, it's all set at night anyway.
Yeah. So mainly in a car as well.
Yes.
It's very isolated.
Very isolated, and you get that wonderful thing that you get. One of your main light sources is apparently the dashboard.
Really exaggerated as well.
Yeah, yeah. Just so you can see the detail and what's actually going on in the story, but it's incredibly effective. So you mentioned Reece, and so what attracted you to Borley Rectory? Why Borley Rectory? What got you involved in that?
It's a childhood thing again. It was one of the first. It was me tiptoeing in those spooky waters when I was very small. There used to be a series of books called the Usborne books, and they did one on ghosts, and they did one on UFOs and monsters and things. And I felt safe with the monsters and the UFOs. Weirdly, they never frightened me, like Nessie and Bigfoot and flying saucers. Never frightened of that. But the ghost one, I was always really hesitant to ever pick up, and it was quite a while until I actually had a copy of it. And I've actually still got a copy of the book here somewhere. And there was a double-page spread in there which just said the most haunted house in England, and it was like a cut-through diagram of the rectory and everything that happened in all the different rooms. And I think it was just that label, this notion that there was this Godzilla of hauntings. There was this place that was the most haunted. If there was a ghost or type of ghost that existed, this was the one. This housed everything you can imagine. Headless coachman, spectral nuns bricked up in the walls. It had everything, and this notion always stuck with me. And I was always, it's like with anything. The reason why I do any of my films really, I kind of grew up with taking for granted that these things are so commonplace and that everyone knows about that. And then, you make the Screaming Skull and they go, I'd never heard that story before. Really? I thought it was so commonplace. And it was the same with Borley. Borley absolutely was a case of... I absolutely thought that it was a place that everyone had heard of. And I was astonished that nobody had actually made a film or attempted to have made a film about it before. So it was because of Usborne. It's the Usborne book of Ghosts. Yeah, Usborne, a children's book. It was a children's book that led me to it. And then when it came, I really wanted to make a sort of an atmospheric, almost noirish black and white thing as a slight departure from the stuff I'd done before, and just thought, well, it's got to be that. It's got to be Borley Rectory. I have to do it, you know. And it's given me such an excuse to do all these great gothic, spooky archetypes as well. So it almost feel like a best of. best of spooks.
Best of spooks, best of haunted nuns on ghostly nuns.
Everything. It's everything in one delicious package, really.
So I mean, the building itself no longer exists. It was burnt down in 19 whatever. So
yeah, 39, and it was demolished a few years after.
Right. And so, where how have you built in your mind, or how have you got the background from your mind directly?
There's no background. It's all going to be painted on curtains. There were a couple of shots in The Screaming Skull, which this made me think, actually, maybe I can do it. Maybe we can pull this off. Where I filmed an old derelict mansion on the edge of Exeter,
right,
called Poltermore House, and it's really derelict. It's really derelict. When I said I wanted a slightly run-down mansion, and I went there to film in it, and it was held up by scaffolding. I mean, it was just hazard tape everywhere, and I just kind of walked in, looked around, thinking, "Oh my God, how am I going to make this work?" So I went and contacted the trust that looked after the place, and lucky for me, they had loads of photographs from the 1920s of the building in its prime.
Right.
And in really high quality. Actually, I don't know how they must have scanned all the original photographs and put them in a library or something. So I took these photographs and then went to the derelict house and tried to line up the actors where I thought that they would be in relation to where this photograph was taken. And then I basically got the character to walk up the derelict steps, and then I would add the character to the photograph taken in the 1920s. And because they were lined up in the same way, he'd be walking up the steps as they were. He'd be walking through a photograph. And it then made me think, right, okay, well, that's exactly what I could do with Borley Rectory. If I can get enough unusual views of the place, I can add the actors to original photographs taken before the building burnt down, which is mainly what I'm going to be doing. Everything else in there is going to be kind of scratch built. I'm just going to take elements from period decor or period furniture, that sort of thing, and then the actors will just be added to them. So it's a little bit like you know, in all these sort of vintage films where you'd have the people stood there and it's very obviously rear projection. Yeah. It's a little bit like that, except obviously it's all done digitally now and it's all going to be green screened. But there are going to be quite a few scenes where, you know, Reece and yourself, in fact, are going to be standing. It's going to be, you're going to be stood in front of a green screen on the day, which, you know, it's literally boring. But when you actually see the film, you're going to be stood in a genuine photograph of the rectory, as if you are there at that time. So it's a weird. It's like pirating the past. It's a past invasion.
I really like that phrase. I really like that. You're describing it now as well as that. I've never worked on green screen before, so I'm really looking forward to doing this. Because there is that whole idea as an actor, you have to imagine your surroundings. In this case, normally if you're doing a film, I mean, when you're doing stage work, often the flats are painted. You know, you may not have physically, you know, the view into the garden may be painted. You know that, and the audience knows. We're all playing this game together, basically. There is that lovely moment as an actor where you think, okay, I'm not sitting in my office at the moment talking to Ashley. I'm actually in the spaceship, and I can feel, you know, the whole pod around me, and so. And this is cool. This is fun. This is exactly when we were, you know. I remember my father gave us tea chests. You know, the big wooden tea chests.
Yeah.
He bought them so that he could cover the loft upstairs, so that we'd have something to walk on there, because they're all made out of wood, obviously. Yeah. He bought half a dozen of them, and he said, right, I'm not going to do this for at least 2-3 weeks. You boys, that's me and my two brothers, they're yours. You can play with them. we had so much fun with those things because we could move them around. They became spaceships. It became a castle.
Yeah.
You know, actors, we're big kids.
Well, I think I spent many a happy summer sat in a cardboard box in the garden. You know, it's just. I remember when we had a washing machine delivered in the late '70s, and because it's such a huge box, my mum just sat me in the box in the garden. Mum's putting me in boxes, and I took felt tip pens in there, and I cut a little window out, and yeah, as far as I was concerned, I was in the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
I was actually in a cardboard box out in the garden, you know. So, but yeah, it is. It's about suspension of disbelief.
Sure.
But, I mean, the funny thing with the green screen is that the other thing that I did notice was that it's useful to have something real to interact with as well. So one thing I have been doing is we've been hiring bits of sort of period furniture, and arranging them sort of in space where everything should be, so that you've got things to interact with. If you have to open a cupboard door, the cupboard is there, so you open the cupboard. But everything behind that cupboard is all green, so all the walls and the floors will be put in later. But you have one or two real things. So hopefully that should be quite interesting as well, because you'll think, so which bits are real and which bits aren't real?
I think it's
and it's going to be a weird mix of things.
Yeah, there is nothing like holding a meerschaum pipe if you're supposed to be smoking.
Exactly. Nobody wants to be there pretending they're sitting on a chair. Just get them a chair.
Your carbs, got your carbs and fly buses.
How long do you have to be there? 20 minutes.
So you've got Reece involved, Julian involved. How did this all come about? These are wonderful people. Luck.
Luck. I think. Luck and a lot of cheek, I think. Julian Sands was the first person to come on board. I interviewed him for Fangoria, and about Ken Russell's Gothic, because I wanted to do a big retrospective on it. And shortly after I'd interviewed him, he contacted me again afterwards to say that he'd seen like a link on the bottom of an email or something, and he'd gone off and he'd actually gone and watched the films. And he really liked them, and then just said, "Are you working on anything at the moment?" And I think at that point, I'd literally only just finished writing that first or second draft of Borley, and I said, "Well, yes and no. I'm thinking about doing this one." And he said, "Oh, okay. Well, if there's anything for me to do in it, I'd love to be involved." So I thought, well, unlike any of the other films, which there's no narration or anything like that at all, I just thought this one would be great with a narration, just kind of like tie it all down, so I could be as wild as I want with the imagery, but it would have that Osborne feeling of this is almost like a very simple beginner's guide to the story. And he said yes. So it was a couple of years ago. We got together with him in London, and he recorded the narration for the film. Everyone else came on board after that, I think. I think actually the next person was Stephen Severin, and that was exactly the same sort of thing. I interviewed him for Fangoria again, and he went off and he looked at the films and seemed quite interested in what I was doing, and asked. He said that if you would like someone to score the film, then ask. And at the time, I didn't really know what to say, because I'd always worked with Mick Grierson, who does all the sound and all the music on all of my stuff. So my initial reaction was that, can't really, sorry, because it felt like selling a friend down the line. But my friend Mick was sort of too busy to make a start on any of that stuff. So I just kind of leapt at the chance of working with Stephen, and he's been sort of keen on the updates, and it's slow, but gradual progress of the project.
Yeah.
And Reece came about during the fundraiser. What was that, sorry?
I was going to say, did you interview Reece as well? But you said it came about during the fundraiser.
That came during the fundraiser. Yeah. It was I think I'd noticed when I was desperately trying to spread the word to get the money to get it started that Reece started retweeting stuff. And obviously he's got a huge fan base. So I was just like, oh, wow, amazing. So I I sent him a message on Twitter just going, thank you, I really appreciate that. That's lovely. Do you want to be in it? Thinking he was going to, tell me to proverbials off. And he said, I'd be honoured. He said, I'd love to be involved in it. I'd love to. Really? Why? He said, yeah. He said, yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to be involved in it. He said, I've always been fascinated by the Borley story, and I'd just love to be a part of it. And then, literally days after that, I got so excited that he was going to be involved in it. I was sat watching the box set of League of Gentlemen, and there's a documentary on there talking about how much that the League of Gentlemen was influenced by things like Hammer and by the Amicus portmanteau films. And that documentary was hosted by Jonathan Rigby, and I was sat working on some images, just almost kind of listening to it, because it was just on in the corner of the screen. I do that a lot, put documentaries on while I'm animating. And I just looked up and went, it's Harry Price. There he is. And I just did the same thing. I've been trying to get in contact with Jonathan Rigby for years, just because of the Hammer connection, and just thinking I've got a weird feeling that we're into very similar things, except he's this, very respected, renowned historian, and I'm just this Burke from Devon, So I never really think he was going to talk to me, and I was just cheeky again. I just said, I'd love you to play Harry Price. I think you'd be amazing. And he said, I'd be honoured. And it was that simple. Nothing ever comes together that easily, ever. but as you know, I suspect it's usually like a toil trying anything to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just came together very, very naturally. After years of things being difficult, slowly this stuff just started to happen. So, yeah, and then once that happened, it becomes this nice snowball thing where people start thinking, oh, right, okay, so-and-so's in it, I quite like to be in that, that sounds great. And people genuinely knowledgeable of the story come on board, and yeah, it's been brilliant.
There's wonderful thing. Yeah. Now, you had a fundraiser. You didn't quite about 2/3 of your original target. So you got some stuff. I know, because I've seen pictures of Reece standing in front of green screens with pipes.
Lots of that.
Yeah, lots of that going on.
Lots of people stood with pipes. It's the ultimate action movie, Borley Rectory. Lots of pipe smoking, anyway.
How can people get involved now? What's your next stage? Because you need to raise some more funds to complete.
Yeah. We've raised enough to get started. We raised enough to because it's an immensely ambitious project. It's going to be about 3 times the length of the other films as well. So I mean, it's a lot of animation involved. And at the time, originally I was hoping to raise about £20,000, which for a 30-minute animation is peanuts. But I eventually thought I'll never make that, so I put up 10. And like I say, we raised about 6.7 grand, I think, which meant that we could get started. I just said, well, do you know what? We've got that money. Let's just get on with it. We can develop some of the technology, the apps, to break the footage down into, because I've had to shoot it in a different way. So we've got that going on. We've been able to organise the first couple of shoots and just get something happening. But while I'm going to be animating pipe smoke for months now. So while I'm working on the projects and just animating all this stuff, and I've got months ahead of me. Tom Atkinson, my producer, who I think you've had some dealings with before because of Hairy Hands. He's a lovely bloke.
He's a lovely bloke. I don't think I've met yet. We've all been emailed and spoken. But
he's mad as a badger. He won't mind me saying that. He's mad. Brilliant. Just brilliant. Phased by anything.
Everyone involved in movies, touch of insanity really helps.
Yes. Well, he's more than a touch. I'd say gripped. So he's going while I'm concentrating on the animating side of things, he's going to be getting together, trying to encourage small businesses to sponsor the production. And also, probably in about a couple of months, we'll probably roll out like a second phase of fundraising to do another bit for production funds, basically.
Right.
So that will all be announced sort of quite soon once that's happening. And yeah, if there's any small businesses that want to sponsor, they just need to contact via the Carrion Film website, really.
So that was going to be my next question. What's the best way for people? You're on Facebook. You're one of my friends on Facebook. Yeah. You're a virtual friend and a real friend.
Thanks.
Is Facebook finding you on Facebook, or should they Carrion Films is your
anything really? That's one of the great things about social media, is that it's actually quite easy to find people to contact them if you really want to. I mean, most of the stuff tends to go through the Carrion Film page. We did a big casting call, and all that went straight through there, and I received all those messages. But yeah, Facebook, those sorts of things, easy to find and contact. So if anyone's interested in following the project, or think that they have a friend who's a millionaire, or they have a chest of gold at the end of the garden, then do contact us. Yes. Yes.
I got that lovely link on Friday. We have news about your ticket. I'd won £3.30. But hey, that was almost as much as I paid for the tickets, come to think of it.
Snapping's the way.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we've got about another 10 minutes officially. I know you need to leave us dead on 8 o'clock, but I'm going to open up the floor now to everyone. We've also got a couple of questions from Paul Flewitt, who who put this up before. So I'm going to ask you Paul Flewitt's questions, and I'm going to open up the floor and ask everyone to basically raise your hands if you want to ask a question, and then if you can unmute yourself when you have a question to ask. Everyone's being very good about sitting there muted, listening to us. I hope you've enjoyed this chat as much as I have. But for Paul Flewitt, who's probably watching this, he's not joined us this evening. As a horror writer and long-standing legend of the horror world, I think that's not what he meant. Where do you see the future of the horror market heading? Now, this is something that I'm sure you write for Fangoria. You possibly can answer this question. Probably answer this question. My answer to this question is very simple. Just watch this gentleman. Who does some amazing work. No, not your daughter. Watch Ashley's, but the other ladies to watch are the Soska twins. I watched their American Mary recently, and I'm just blown away. These are people who know how to make a gory movie that's actually got a really interesting story. Very human people in it who you are interested in, care about. It's actually a romance. It's a dark romance as far as I can see. So my answer is yeah.
And Jovanka Vukovic as well. I think she's definitely one to watch.
Who's just been announced with Jacqueline S?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
I saw her.
She's somebody to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting.
And it's great because she's a female director as well, and there's not with the Oscars as well. It's nice. It's nice to see some women directors coming through, being given a chance.
And making their chances. I mean, I was chatting to the Oscar sisters back in Texas earlier, and I hope to see them next month in Chicago, down at the same con. And they are. I said to one of them, listen. It's like talking to a young Clive Barker talking to you, because they're just so full of these wonderful ideas and determination to get things done. It's the long haul that they're interested in, and it's just doing really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I met them very briefly at Fright Fest, and I wish that I'd known who they were when I met them, because I met them and I had not the faintest idea who they were. And it was one of those slightly embarrassing sort of shaking hands, going, hello. And it was only at the end of the festival I just thought, I wish that I'd seen the film before I'd met them, Then I would have had so much to talk to them about. But it was always the way. It was just, you get introduced to someone and you go, hello.
Yes.
They had no idea who I was. I had no idea who they were.
Yeah.
It was just, ridiculous.
I know. Yeah, yeah. I have that occasionally at conventions. We're just going, "Who are you again? You haven't
I,
watched your movie." But I'm
yeah,
going to pretend you have, because when you're at conventions, everyone's watched everyone's. We just take it as read. Everyone's watched your movie and they love it.
everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I know your entire career, but let's not talk about it. May be embarrassed by a whole, not knowing something. So yeah, that's definitely the answer to that question. Um, and Paul's next question was an interesting one as well. He said, with new authors taking their cues from all over horror's history, could we be on the threshold of a new golden age of dark creativity? How do you tell?
How do you tell? You go into the future and you look back.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I think so. I think so. One of the interesting things now is that the horror genre has changed to such a great deal because the avenues within which to experience it have opened up so much.
Mm.
I know that in some ways there's less money around to develop projects, but in terms of if you're an independent, you've got so many new ways of reaching an audience now.
Yeah.
Which means I think there's less an inclination to chase the mainstream as much as possibly there used to be, because that people realise that people like the Soska twins. I think they've realised that they could have just gone out and made a zombie movie, but they didn't. And the reason why they've been noticed is that they're absolutely forging their own identity, and they're using their own original ideas. And the reason why people got excited is because they were original ideas.
Yeah.
That they're not just going. They're not doing the studio thing where they're just going, okay, so what was popular this week? All right, well, we'll make one of those then. I think that people are realizing, and especially within this genre, that as much as we like a good laugh and watching Friday the 13th Part 11 or whatever, and there's that comfort food soap opera element of that.
Yeah.
Generally, people who love horror especially have that addiction where they want to be. They want some familiar tropes, but ultimately they want the shock of the new. They want something passionate and different.
Yeah.
And I think that the new kind of multimedia environment is opening up that. It's allowing people to do quite bold, daring stuff, and also you've got people making things like the Whisper in Darkness is getting those sorts of very retro type H.P. Lovecraftian things, which the mainstream's too frightened to do. So independents are making them. So I think it has opened it up. I think in a weird way, maybe we're going to get to this point where the mainstream are going to start chasing the independents again, which is what always happens, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
It'll get assimilated, and then it'll go off and it'll sprout into something else.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's the fact that there is this democratization of access to distribution.
Yeah.
You can get stuff. Doesn't always, you get an awful lot of stuff that I really just can't be bothered to sit through. But
absolutely, but that's always been the way. That's always been the way with horror. I think that there's always been this element of that 90% of everything is crap.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same for most things actually. But it's the even amongst the runts of the litter with horror, you're always going to find some gems. There's always something interesting or germs of an idea which is fascinating. Yeah. And I think that if you look at the great achievements in the genre, it's always worth giving it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cool. All right. Well, that's with Paul. We've got a couple of other questions come in which are more to do with actually to do with
furious waving.
But also, we've had people join it. Vicky, Peter, John, Fernando's there, Eric's there, Damien's there. Hello to you all. Is there anyone? Oh, wave enthusiastically. Is there anybody there who's got a question for myself or Ashley that you'd like to ask, or more general question about? Yeah, Vicky's waving a hand. Vicky, go on, Vicky, go for it. Let me see if I've unmuted you. I think I've unmuted you. What's your question, Vicky?
Yeah, I muted myself. Last weekend I was over at Days of the Dead with the Nightbreed reunion, which was really cool. And I attended the panel. They had a pretty interesting question I'd want to ask you. Regardless of whether or not you've seen the since it's now being released on video, at least for now in the U.S., What scene are you hoping to be restored in the Cabal cut, and why?
There is there was a scene that was filmed which features Peliquin and Kinski. About halfway through the movie, or about 2/3 of the way through the movie, when the attack happens on Midian. And basically, it's only 4 lines. I remember it took 16 hours to film my 2 lines. By the time we got me into makeup, we got me on set, and Ollie Parker wasn't available that day, so they had filmed his lines on a different day. Although I don't know if they actually got to film them, but I'm hoping they did. Because it's one of Clive's genius things, is that he can say so much in a few lines, and that was basically, it's Kinski saying this was our fault, and Pelican saying, what do you mean? He said, Kinski said, listen, there were warnings, it was painted on the wall, for God's sake, effectively. And Pelican saying, okay, you want me to suffer? Okay, I'll suffer. And that's what prompts him to run upstairs to the surface to try and take on a truck. You know, he's like, you want me to suffer for what I've done. It was never in the original cut at all. There was one, I think there was one scene where there's one clip where I go, like, that is Kinski, and that made it into the movie, and I'm pretty certain that was filmed on that day. But yes, that is the one scene that I was delighted when I saw that the nightclub scene was back, because Anne Bob is a wonderful singer. It's back. So
that's what I've heard.
If there is one, that is the one that I would really like to be back in it. I haven't actually got around to ordering my copy yet.
Yeah, I still need to do mine as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Be interesting. I'm trying to work out if I'm going to go. If there are still any left, I think there are only 5,000 of the limited edition, which has actually got all the extras. But it'd be nice also if they did distribute it over in Europe and the rest of the world as well. But we'll see. But yeah, that's the answer to that question. Cool. Thank you very much for your question. Anybody else got any questions for myself or for Ashley? Before Ashley, I know, has to go and look after a small person. Eric,
Yeah.
you wanted to ask a question. Ashley, do you need to leave us?
I probably should. Should. There's a little Lily needs to go to bed.
Yeah. All right, then. Well, Ashley, I'll stay on for another 10 minutes or however long the guys want to. Ashley, thank you very much indeed for your time coming on and talking about us.
My pleasure.
Please spread the word about Borley Rectory, because I think it's going to be amazing. In fact, no, I know it's going to be amazing.
And you're going to be in it.
And I'm going to be in it. So cool. So, yeah, please spread the word. Please follow Ashley and follow what's happening with this, because it's going to be a really exciting project.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Good night.
Same time next time.
Yeah. Take care, sunshine.
Good night.
Cool. Right then, guys. Anybody else has got? There is a question to DJ Gorgasm. I'll answer in a few minutes. But has anybody else got a question? Eric, did you have a question, or you were just waving your hands? No. Okay. There's a question from DJ Gorgasm here. Just want to say, I love all your performances you've done in Hellraiser 1, 2, Nightbreed. How excited are you that Clive... Well, thank you very much. How excited are you that Clive is finally getting to show the Cabal cut thanks to the Screen Factory, and how much of the extra footage are you in? The answer to that question is I'm very excited. As Russell Charrington, Simon Bamford, and everybody else, the rest of the cast who we went out and supported Occupy Midian, and all those people who signed the petition and attended screenings of what was the Cabal cut before they discovered the missing footage. So the answer to your question is I don't know how much I'm in you just heard my answer to Vicky. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know when I'm going to be have a chance to see it. I'm hoping all these things are in the laps of the gods as to when I might actually get across to America and do one of the screenings. But I would love to go into the new. I'm very excited, and it would be really awesome just to go along to something like Fear Fest or Screen Fest or one of the others, and just see the fully restored Nightbreed with Clive's direction on the big screen. So the answer to your question is, I'm afraid I don't know. But yeah, just very excited. That would be absolutely amazing. His next question was, I will come back to you guys. Let me just answer the next question. What are the chances of a Hellraiser reunion in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, OPAT's Fan Expo, or upcoming Fangoria convention in Toronto as well? I know that Clive had a blast the last time he was here. The chances are, if they do the usual thing of inviting me, and we do the usual deal, I would love to go. I particularly love to go to Canada. There were a couple of possibilities that fell through, unfortunately. I would love to visit Canada because my grandfather fought for the Canadians in the First World War. He was British. He'd just gone across to Canada. I don't think it was just a way to get back, but he had a fascinating time, apparently. He went in search of an uncle who he never found. But yes, I would love to go to Canada, and I'm always up to doing a convention in Canada. What the chances? No idea. Nothing's been said yet, is the honest answer to that one. And there's a question here from Mark Hartkamp. Am I still in touch with Clive? I've not spoken to him personally for a while. He's still creating. I went to his home and the studios, and Seraphim Studios, last time I was in Los Angeles. Clive wasn't available, but I had a long chat with Mark, who's head of Seraphim. And Mark was just showing me some of the stuff that Clive had done recently in terms of painting and so on. He did, I think I've told this story before, I was looking at a beautiful picture of a painting of trees in the snow, and this is something that Clive had just whipped up when somebody spilt some white paint on some sandpaper, a large sheet of sandpaper, when they had the builders in. So he's still there, he's still creating stuff, but best to go to his website, find out what his plans are. It's due to appear in Los Angeles at one of the Nightbreed screenings towards the end of the year. November off the top of my head, but don't quote me. I think it's Days of the Dead in Los Angeles. So he is scheduled to be there. So maybe a chance to see him then. Cool. Right, everybody's muted at the moment, please. And we're about 10 past, but I'm just going to, anybody who actually wants to say anything. John. Hello, John. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Did you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
All evening you've been chatting about the horror movies you're incorporating with. But how about the other movies you're working in? I remember a movie, Backpack.
Yes. It's on hiatus at the moment. Sadly, they ran out of funds. I was hoping to speak to Mike Clark, the director, on Friday, but I missed the call. That was my fault. I actually need to chase him up again at the beginning of next week, find out where. I've not heard anything on. It's the same with so many of these things. The stuff that I'd seen was really exciting and very good. But he, as I say, it's on hiatus at the moment, and I'm just waiting to hear where we are going with next. So hopefully later this year, something should come from that. I'm also there's some things kind of in early development stage, which are way too early to talk about, and we've not even got scripts and so on together. But yeah, that's what's happened with Backpack at the moment, on hiatus. But as soon as it starts up again, I'll let everybody know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's my pleasure. Anybody else? Whilst I'm here, anybody else want to ask a question? Whilst Eric's vaping like mad, Fernando would like to ask a question. Okay, unmute yourself, Fernando. Hi, Guy. How are you? Oh, I can't hear you, Fernando. Hello? No. Fernando, can't hear you. Your microphone may have got dropped out of its... Is that better? Hello? No. No. No, sorry, mate. Oh, no, actually, I think that's Damien I can hear in the background. I'm just going to mute Damien just to make sure. Fernando? Do you want to try using the Q&A app or using the message? I can see your lips moving, but I can't. I can't hear you. Try using the in chat or oh, I've got a chat message. Hopefully Fernando will be able to come and join us. Anybody else got a question whilst Fernando's? Oh, yes, Peter. Peter, how are you doing? Hi, Peter. I've got the same problem with Peter. What is going on with people? Microphone's not working today. Peter, no. There is if you scroll to the top of the, if you scroll to the top of your screen, Pete, can you see there's a little command there? Has it got mute microphone? That's sometimes a trick. You're not muted. No, I'm afraid my lip reading is not good enough. So I'm going to unmute myself. Eric was obviously trying to unmute himself. No, Peter? There should be, if you scroll to the left of your screen, you should have either chat or the Q&A, both of which should allow you to ask a question. If you click on the side, you should be able to. No, I think we're having that kind of fun. Eric, do you have a question? I'm trying to unmute Eric.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Eric. Yes. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. I was just going to ask when the con in Chicago was.
The con in Chicago, I can give you an answer to that question if you bear with me for just 2 seconds. The actual dates, it's flashback weekend, and it's the 8th to the 10th of August. So about 5 weeks away, 6 weeks away, 5 or 6 weeks away. Yeah, it's Flashbacks Chicago, and it's myself and Barbie Wilde will be there. I think George Romero. I was looking at the guests. I know it's a big lineup of guests.
I was considering doing a road trip.
Oh, cool. Oh, it would be very good. It would be very cool to see you if you are able to make it.
Well, I finally worked the kinks out of everything.
Yes. Eric is working on some special projects at the moment, which we hope to be able to share with you at some point. It's one of those projects which I will let Eric tell you about. What can you tell them about it, Eric?
Great, put me on the spot. Nico wrote.
You've got a minute. you've got a minute, because I'm going to start winding, because I can smell my dinner.
Well, it's kind of a collaborated effort where you've written a story and I've managed to base artwork from the story, and you've actually managed to base the story from the artwork. So it's kind of which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, no, and the story is malleable, and I'm thinking that we were running into some, but we'll tell you more about this. We'll make an official announcement later on. But yes, it would be very cool to see you in Chicago if you're able to make it. Right, I'm going to mute you, Eric, and I'm just going to ask. Thank you very much for the question.
I'm still mute now, right?
No, Peter, you are in the land of the sound.
Oh wow! How are everybody doing? Finally, I got the right button here.
Finally.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much, Peter.
Quick question. Going back to when you did the interview with Phil and Peter on Hellraiser podcast.
Yes, indeed.
We're going back a while.
Yes.
You mentioned when you left your regular job to pursue writing.
Yes.
Did you already have a couple of stories already finished, or did you just go out, just throw caution to the wind?
It was a combination of both, actually. Two of the stories in What Monsters Do were existing, and one had been published. The Beast in Beauty had been published, although I rewrote that. Green Eyes was about half the length that it is now. And I just kind of expanded it and just actually followed the story to its logical conclusion.
Okay.
With that one. The other ones, you can't see it now because I've taken it off. That big board behind me, I just did a mind map of monsters. I've got it on photo. I've still got scattered around the place. And basically I wrote the word monsters in the middle. And then I started thinking of all the different monsters. Some of which I've yet to explore, some of which will be going into the third volume of stories. So it still felt like jumping in after having not written for so very, very long.
So you did go out on a limb a little bit.
I did go. Listen, every writer, every time they put their pen to paper, I think, yes, is definitely going out on a limb. And there is that moment where you offer your book to the the reading public and go, please, like my story.
But we did.
So thank you. Yes, that's the answer to that one.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your question. Any more questions before we start wrapping this up? Yes, Fernando is going to try again. Peter, let's try. Fernando. Hi, Fernando.
Hello, Nick.
Unmuted Fernando.
Can you hear me?
Yay! I can hear you, Fernando. Lovely to talk to you, mate. How are you doing?
Fine, actually, yeah. Just I cured myself from a flu a couple of days ago. I was really in bed all the time. But my question is about Borley Rectory. When when it's going to come out, and how do you feel about the green screen? Actually,
I think in terms of when is it going to come out, that's really going to depend on funding again. As Ashley mentioned, they're looking for businesses to support them as one funding source. But they're also going to be running I don't know if it'll be Indiegogo or Kickstarter. I assume it'll be Indiegogo because the first one I was Indiegogo, I think. It's going to be 2015 at the earliest, I would hope. It won't be. I can't imagine it will be. Ashley has got an awful lot of animating to be done. So I'm assuming it's going to be something, assuming they can get the funding at the end of the year, then that's when it will come out. It'll be out sometime next year. But the best way to find out is just to follow Ashley. And in terms of the green screen, I think as I mentioned before, basically I'm really excited by the idea. it's a very interesting. I'm assuming it's going to be a very interesting process because knowing where you have to look to get the, there's somebody who says look at the bookcase and there isn't a bookcase there. You need some sort of marker on set to show you where you need to go, where you need to look, where your concentration has got to be. So that should be very interesting. I'm assuming they will know how to do that. So I think it's like, I'm just really looking forward to working with Ashley apart from anything else. I kind of mentioned the first time I worked with him was on Hairy Hands. It's just a few lines I've got at the end of the movie. But he came round and we recorded in our front room and we gave him a cream tea, I remember. Craig had baked scones. And he was here for about 3 or 4 hours. We got on so well. He's just such a really interesting guy to listen to and talk to. And he obviously knows the world of horror. And his articles are always very interesting in Fangoria. And his artwork's really interesting as well. I love his covers that he's done. So, yeah, the bottom line, the general answer to that question is I'm very excited. very excited to be. Does anybody else have, I think we'll make this the last question. Does anybody else have a question? Anybody wave a hand? I'm just looking at the bottom of the screen. Okay. Poor Rachel. Yeah, you did get there eventually. Hi, Rachel. You'll be able to watch the rest of this online. Right then, guys, I'm going to call this a night. Yay, 1 hour and 20 minutes. Thank you all so much for coming to join me. It really is good, and I do I really enjoy your input. The next hangout will be on July 27th, which is just over 3 weeks away. In fact, it's 3 weeks tonight. I'm really excited. It's going to be with Simon Bamford. Obviously, Simon is a great friend of mine, I dearly love. And as I say, normally when we get together, we spend most of our time laughing, bouncing off each other. I'm going to be interviewing him with Luggage in the Crypt, asking what he would take into the afterlife with him. Do check out Borley Rectory, check out Ashley Thorpe, and honestly, again, thanks all very much indeed. And good night, folks. Have a nice evening, depending on where you are. Have a nice evening, rest of the day. Have a nice weekend. Great week. Take care, guys. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. See you in 3 weeks.
See ya. Bye.